You're listening to the B&H Photography Podcast. For over 40 years, B&H has been the professional source for photography, video, audio, and more. For your favorite gear, news, and reviews, visit us at bnh.com or download the B&H app to your iPhone or Android device. Now here's your host, Alan Weitz.
Greetings and welcome to the B&H Photography Mini Podcast. Last week we had a really interesting discussion with photographer Richard Drew having to do with Falling Man, the photograph that he is well known for. We also touched on a lot of other topics having to do with earlier parts of his career. Specifically, he was there with the evening that Robert Kennedy was assassinated in 1968, and he's a Pulitzer Prize winner. And we've gotten some interesting conversations that were just too good to let go. So we decided to put together a mini episode catching up on some other aspects of Richard's career, which again is just fascinating. Here we go. Richard, if we could just take a little slip back in time for a second, let's talk a little bit about your early career when you first started out, and also, how'd you find yourself in the Ambassador Hotel that evening in June of 1968? It was for the Pasadena
Star News.
There we go. I stand
Actually,
corrected.
it was the Independent Star News. The Independent was in the morning, and the Star News in the afternoon. Twice daily newspaper.
Oh,
How about that? It's a suburb of Los Angeles. Yeah. I was a staff photographer at the Star News before I joined the AP.
Is that your home? Are you from?
I'm originally from down that
California?
area, Southern California. Yes, sir.
okay.
Robert Kennedy got into the race for president late, and he got into it in time to be in the California primary. And he would come to California, and whenever he would come, along with, I used to cover Humphrey and all the other candidates when they would come into town, come to our area, or even in the LA area if it was within shouting distance. And I didn't have any other assignments. And would follow him around and photograph him. We used to be able to ride on the back of the car. You know, they would have like a little mini motorcade down the street, and you could sit on the trunk of the car or the hood of the car. It was really crazy at that time. So after having done that, I didn't want to sit home and watch election results on TV that night. So I assigned myself to go to the Ambassador Hotel, so I got a credential. And I was in the auditorium, and I was waiting on the stage for him, and I was sort of in that crowd behind him on the stage. If you're seeing it, and goes, "Now on to Chicago." He raises his hand, and everybody applauds. And then he was on this stage, and we were supposed to go out through the auditorium, through the ballroom crowd of the Ambassador, but it was like sardines in there. The people were like all together, and you couldn't exit that way. The only way out of there was off to if you're standing on the stage facing the audience, it was off to the left, down a couple of steps off the stage and into a door into the kitchen. So I had been up there a long time, made my pictures. He was ready to go, and I went ahead of him, and I went to get a glass of water because I was very thirsty. And he walked past me, and I went right in behind him, and we got, 5 or 8 steps into the kitchen, and I was directly behind him, right over his right shoulder, right behind him, right over his right shoulder. And I saw this hand come out with a gun, and I was in the Army Reserve at the time, and I hit the floor. And that's when Sirhan shot him in the kitchen. And then I got up, and I climbed on a table. There was like a serving table there, a stainless steel serving table. And I photographed him lying on the floor, being held by the kitchen worker. Mm-hmm. And Ethel Kennedy putting her hand up and saying, "No, don't take any pictures," and this, that, and the other, and all the craziness, and they're trying to subdue Sirhan. Now, there was a UPI photographer who since retired, Ron Bennett, who lives now in the Washington, D.C. area, Boris Yarrow, who was a Los Angeles Times photographer, Harry Benson, famous photographer, and Bill Epperidge.
Epperidge,
Yeah.
That's the famous.
And another famous photographer. And on one of the anniversaries of the Robert Kennedy's death, Epperidge sent me an email. He says, "Is this you standing on the table?" And I looked and I said, so I was looking through my take also, and I found I have a picture of him photographing Robert Kennedy in the background I never noticed before. So we got to exchange photos of each other in that time.
Wow.
So what you're saying is that, do you know if Sirhan was actually stalking? Because you said he wasn't supposed to go off that direction.
That's the
Any
big
clue?
question that's always been in my mind. How did Sirhan know to be in the kitchen at that time? I have no idea.
Okay.
Oh, here's another one of these oddities. Sirhan lived with his mother in Pasadena. for the newspaper that I worked for. So myself and the LA Times photographer, who was in the kitchen, who was what he used to call a zone photographer. We used to work in his zone. His was the San Gabriel Valley, and that's where my newspaper was. Pasadena was in the San Gabriel Valley. So we knew each other from being on the street together, and he was a real ambulance chaser, had a scanner in his car, and I used to have the same thing that chase, spot news. So we both showed up at Sirhan's house that morning before the authorities did. And we were, how do you find out how somebody lives? You go through their trash. So we and I were going through his trash, which was in the partially open garage door. We could see in the garage door that he had been taking target practice in his garage. Oh. He had a target on there, and we found spent .22 caliber shells in the garbage.
Wow. Well, other people were shot that day. I don't think there were several people who were victims of that shooting that day. Yeah. But you were, at the time, 21, is that correct?
That's correct.
So clearly you were a photographer from the get-go, right?
I had worked as what they used to call copy boy. Now they're editorial assistants. I used to go in and show up in the morning and the San Gabriel Valley Daily Tribune, and I would rip the stories off the wire, and all the stories for the editors to read. They could see the stories, but as the stories came in on the teletype machine, they also came out on about a 1-inch wide piece of punch tape. That punch tape would correspond to the story, and then they could send that punch tape in to the composing room where it could be set in lead type and then put in galleys.
Yeah. Instagram is so much easier. It really is.
And maybe we could flash forward to 92 campaign, or if you want to update us on anything that came in between. I'm more than curious to know.
One thing I did was with the Kennedy thing, I did receive a letter written in German from Germany, asking me why if I saw this happening to Robert Kennedy, why didn't I throw myself in front of Robert Kennedy, and so I would, sacrifice my life so he could go on.
Yeah, but you were behind him.
Well, this is a perception. Right?
Yeah. Questions we can't ask or answer. But the Pulitzer came as working as a team for the AP covering the 92 campaign, correct?
That's correct. Yeah. And a lot of the photographers traveled. One that we shared the Pulitzer for our campaign coverage. My photo was taken at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel. It was of Ross Perot. And he had not gotten in the race yet. He was speaking to, I don't know what the conference was, like an editor's conference or something, I think. And he came out a side door, and there was a sort of a gaggle of media there. And he said, somebody asked him, "Are you gonna get in the race?" And he had that big, wide open grin. And he said, "Watch my lips." He didn't say, "Watch my lips." I actually was able to give him a copy of the picture once he was at CBS, and I had to go photograph him there a couple years later, and I gave him a copy of the picture.
Is there any photo other than the ones we're speaking about that you would kind of hold up as one of your best or your favorite, or a moment or some event you covered that?
Wow, that's a hard one. I never thought about that.
I mean, obviously, we have bookends here.
Yeah, exactly. I have 2 points in history, which are there. But see, in my daily life as a photographer for the AP, I cover. We already talked about Fashion Week. I do that twice a year. That's coming up real soon. I do the UN. I cover the New York Stock Exchange a lot. I was the first photographer to have an all-access pass to walk around the floor unescorted to the New York Stock Exchange. Because now I have a little office that I work in there. It's nice. So sometimes that'll be my day. I'll start my day there for the opening bell stuff and early trading, depending on how volatile the market's going to be that day. Yesterday we did a story about immigrants. So I was photographing some immigrants at a church with a priest. So it's from soup to nuts.
Do you self-assign anything? Do you cover things that of your interest?
Not really. We have pretty much, we have to follow what the reporters are writing about and illustrate that. And a lot of times I get to work the assignment desk also. So I have to assign photographers to go here and there too.
We describe it a lot. A lot of the stuff you do is just routine and mundane. A lot of stuff, which is true for a lot of.
Yeah, but you don't want to have a routine and mundane photograph because then it's not going to catch somebody's eye. You always got to look for another angle, another thing to make your viewer want to look at your pictures.
And that's where I was going. Since you've taken probably the most incredible photograph ever taken, let's just call it what it is. Okay, how do you Do you feel that you still might have one more shot like that in? I mean, we never know, obviously. Maybe it's a silly question, but, when you go out, again, on September 11th, you set out to photograph a maternity fashion show.
That's true, yeah.
Okay. When you head out to photograph equally commonplace things.
When I go to the New York Stock Exchange, for example, I have competition. There are other photographers now who have passes to go around the floor of the exchange. I have to outshoot them. And matter of fact, one of my competition said the other day, he says, my boss wants to know why you're always kicking my ass.
Okay, good. All right.
Last week I had to photograph the introduction of a new phone, a new Samsung phone. And that photographer was sitting next to me. Oh, yeah. And the next day in the New York Times, they used my picture, the top half of the business page, the whole... blank and top half of the page. And so I was very quiet about that. And he and I have had texted back and forth. He didn't mention it yet, and I haven't mentioned it either.
You got it, though. Cool. This is something that was one of my note questions, and I think you've answered it sufficiently, but I just want to throw it out there. The controversy that came, if you want to call it that, after the image was shown, have you changed your photography?
I have never changed my approach to photojournalism at all.
That's the impression I got from your
I've been through an era where at the Pasadena paper we shot everything on 2 1/4. I had a Rolly and a Honeywell strobe.
Potato masher.
And Friday night football, we had 2 photographers work Friday night high school football. One of us had to shoot something quick and then get it back to the newspaper for Saturday. The next one was for the Sunday paper. So we didn't shoot. 35 was only for sports during the day. You didn't, 35 was, you didn't shoot with a Nikon. You didn't shoot that way. So we used to have to carry, I had a slave light. We used to like 2 light almost everything too. So you had to learn lighting. So, and we had a 4x5 that we used to, because we had the Tournament of Roses parade every year. And it went by right down Colorado Boulevard in front of the building. And there was one photographer who was on this reviewing stand at the corner of Orange Grove and Colorado Boulevard. And they would be there and they would actually print a book of each one with all the floats on it. Right. And so we would shoot 4x5. And we'd shoot one float on one side and one on the other, and we'd take the page out of the book, wrap it around with a rubber band around, and hand it to a runner on a motorcycle, and then take it down Colorado Boulevard, and we'd put out an afternoon paper with pictures from the parade as souvenirs. People would buy them, and it was really cool. That was the Star News in the afternoon. Well, one year, and we used to always have to have a front page picture, and we could shoot it from a roof of our building. And so I would sit down the edge of the building, like with my head, and I would look down Colorado Boulevard with a 4x5, big images, and I would then take the picture. They would then take it down to the darkroom and then soup it and make a print and send it to the composing room and shoot it, and do all that. That's how I learned to read upside down and backwards, was having to read photo captions in the composing room. And so, I can look over at people when they're doing something on whatever pages. I can read it right away because I had that. Training right now.
That phrase, mind your P's and Q's?
Yeah.
You know where that's from?
No. From the composing room?
Type.
Really?
Yeah. Because upside down, P's and Q's, it's easy to twist them around. That's
true.
where that phrase comes from.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Printing.
Yeah. So anyway, going back. So when we started, we used to shoot everything on 2 1/4, and then a 4x5 with the parade and Friday night football. And then I went from that era to, we moved to 35 millimeter. That became the new norm. We could shoot that, everything as time went along. And then when the AP came up with the NC 2000, the News Camera 2000 in 97, 98, I think it was, with a thing with Kodak. We went into a partnership with Kodak, and they built the guts for it, and they would take a Nikon or a Canon and made it up with a back, and with a digital back. The memory card wasn't solid state. The first ones, they were spinning media.
Yes.
And if you dropped that, you couldn't use it because it was like dropping a hard drive.
Exactly.
It's all it was a mini hard drive.
It was a small laptop. That's right.
And it was like $1 a megabyte. So you had a 125 meg card. It was $125.
I remember the first 1 gig micro drives came out. We were selling them for up to $1,400.
Oh my God. Holy man.
I love
Well, I was in terms of the camera that you were using that day. It was like $11,000 camera, I think, at the
I
time.
remember. I worked at Photocam. We were selling those things. I remember them.
They were $15,000, and I had two of them. The AP gave them to me, and I was one of the guinea pigs.
Yeah.
And I had two of them. People used to say, "You have two NC2000s?" I said, "Yeah." That I would pick, and you had to buy a special filter. It was called a hot mirror
filter. That's correct.
Because there was too much magenta in this chip.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it was, what was it, 1.2, whatever you, no, even that was the next step around.
Oh, the original like 1.2 or 1.3, they were nothing. And, and the sensors were like, if you put a 50 millimeter lens, it was like a 270 millimeter equivalent. You had an advanced camera.
Yeah. The interesting, given that much of the research and investigation into the identity of Falling Man, involved blowing up this image and looking carefully at the T-shirt and facial descriptions of something that is 2 megapixel, 2 megapixel, and it was successful.
And it was a proprietary file type also.
That's
I don't know if you can look at it as a raw file or not. I don't know.
It was a type of a raw file, but it was very, very.
You had to have a special plugin in Photoshop that Kodak put out. They had to have this plug-in to look at it, and now so I had this camera, and then we started being able to send pictures from our laptop, portable. So I photographed the funeral for the last victim of the Unabomber. It was in New Jersey. So I went to the church, and I photographed them taking the casket in the church and people going in. And I went back and sat in my car, and I opened up my Mac computer. It's a big Mac computer. It wasn't a MacBook at the time.
Yeah.
And I had a bag phone. You remember the bag phones? I had a bag phone that I was transmitting the pictures from probably with the NC2000, I guess it was, I don't know what era it was. And there was satellite guys with the satellite trucks were there. They had already uploaded their stuff, via satellite. And the TV guys. And I had two of them sitting in my back seat watching me do this. They said, "You can send a picture over a cell phone?" I said, "You just bounce stuff off a satellite, out in space." And they were really amazed that we were able to do this. So I've been really in the front of all the technology, at least for the AP, about doing this sort of thing.
Do you shoot with the phone? Do you shoot at all?
Just from
stuff?
One fashion week, we had a thing where we were doing. We had a immediate view thing. I mean, we were doing feature stuff. Like before and after, I would go on backstage and we would put the certain hashtag in our system would put it up on this website. It was really cool, and I had a really good time doing that. It was a lot of fun. But I still had to shoot the regular show with my camera. But I did all this other sort of ancillary stuff. Yeah, we have different ways that we upload, like stills, for example. I'll go on a job and I have a wire that goes from the side of my 5D Mark III, plugs into the phone without the Mophie battery on, of course. Yeah. And then I can look at like a small contact sheet on my phone of the pictures, and I'll choose a picture, and then I can upload it to our server. So I don't, and someone in the office then will do the cropping and captioning and all, but at least we can get something out quick, because we don't have a lot of the modules that we can. Like for the 1DX camera on the side of that Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
We have a lot of those, because they're like very expensive.
Yeah,
this is a workaround.
Well, I think the Mark IV has Wi-Fi.
Yeah, it does.
Does it? Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
That's why I keep asking.
When did you switch to Canon because AP switched? Or,
I was probably one of the last holdouts after the Olympics in Athens. I did the Athens Olympics, and I was I was still shooting a Nikon at the time. And when I came back from there, whenever there was that 2004, was that 2004 Olympics or 2008? I can't remember. Whatever it was, so that's when I switched. I mean, the other people in the company had. I remember back when the AP was thinking about switching from. Oh no, the AP had switched from Nikon to Canon cameras. I had a version. What was it called? What they had a built-in. Oh, what was it? It was an AE1 at an AE1.
Yeah, I remember.
At an AE1, and I went somewhere where Canon was at some sporting event or something where Canon was having their professional services. They would lend you lenses, and the techs had never seen one, and they wanted to look at the camera. Yeah, we had some Canon lent us cameras to use. And all. It was the AE1. I had something called Cam Ranger for a while, which was a way to sync up the camera.
Yeah. Okay.
I still have that. Cam Ranger. I still have the app on my phone. FTP Client Pro is what I use now. That's what we use. This is FTP Client Pro is the one that I use to get into our server at the office.
Okay.
And that's the one that I can connect, and it will get me in, and I can then look at the contact sheet.
So there you have it, Richard Drew. An interesting career, and he's still working. That's the best part about it. As usual, thank you to John Harris. Thank you to Jason Tables. And thank you to you, our listeners, because without you, we're just talking to ourselves. Next week, tune in for a whole new episode. And as always, thank you so much for joining us today.